Hi, and welcome to the Lawn Fawn Fan Summer YouTube Hop. For my cards today, I'm using the Giant Sending Big Hugs die as well as the Happy Hugs stamp set. This stamp set does have a corresponding die, but I didn't use it. I just decided to fussy cut my images out. So first I'm going to start with stamping. I'm stamping the various critters that are giving each other hugs onto some white cardstock using an alcohol marker friendly black ink. I'm using my Misty and my little Stampendous helper to make sure I have a nice clean stamped image or images, and then I'm going to pull it out of my Misty and use my Spectrum Noir Illustrator markers to color them in. I went ahead and fussy cut those out, and then I grabbed a ton of different scrap papers from my scrap bins. And using my paper trimmer, I just trimmed about 3 strips of each color to 1/4 of an inch wide. I really wanted to make some cards using scrap cardstock. I don't know if you are anything like me, but you save everything and then never use it. So I wanted to come up with an idea to use all of those scrap pieces of cardstock that are gathering dust wherever you store yours. I'm going to take another flat cardstock piece. This is already trimmed down to an A2 size from scrapbook.com, and I applied a adhesive sheet. This one was 6x6 by Sizzix, and I just applied that paper down to the adhesive sheet and trimmed off the excess and saved those for a future project. I'm just using this scoring tool to make sure that I have a really good adhesion to my cardstock, and then I pulled off the release paper. Now I'm going to take one colored strip at a time and start placing them onto my card base that I have here, or my background base I should say. And I started with red, and I'm going to work both ways across the card. It was kind of a short piece, so I wanted to make sure that I had it in a good spot, that I would reach both sides of my card here to create a nice fun diagonal piece. Now what I should have done was been much better organized at how I was laying my colors. So I went red, and then I have a darker orange, then I have a more middle tone orange, I have an orangey yellow, and it keeps going all the way until a light purple, and then back again to pink. So I'm going to spare you from watching me play with all these strips and get them in correct order, and go ahead and finish this up. So once I have all of my colors in place, I'm going to use that same kind of scoring tool. I think this was actually intended for rub-ons way back in the day, to make sure that I have enough adhesion, that those cardstock pieces are really sticking, and making sure that everything's in place before I trim off the excess. So now that's done, I will get out those scissors again and trim off all the excess cardstock all the way around my card background. And there I have a beautiful vibrant rainbow background using all of my scraps that have been sitting and waiting for me to use them for probably years at this point. There was one little piece I didn't really think about my corners and how it would affect having these tiny little pieces on my corners. So I just used some wet glue to reinforce that one little corner that needs a little bit of that cardstock. And once that dried, I didn't mean to do this off camera, but I did trim off the excess, so that little corner has that little bit of blue cardstock there. And now that my background is done, I'm going to work on my Sending Big Hugs. I die cut this awesome gigantic die out of some Pearlescent Vellum as well as white cardstock. I thought it would be really fun to have this big bold white sentiment on this vibrant background, and I wanted to offset it with this Pearlescent Vellum because I thought it would be a really pretty kind of shimmery opalescent glow behind my white cardstock. So I put, unfortunately, way too much glue on the back of this white cardstock, but that's okay. I'm going to clean it off. So I am going to just offset that Pearlescent Vellum just a bit to the bottom right and adhere that white cardstock down. So I'm tapping the background, making sure that vellum is nice and secured, and then I wiped off any excess. Now I took some really thin foam tape or foam adhesive strips and placed them all around the Sending Big Hug sentiment. I wanted to make sure it would be nice and secure and not visible behind my Sending Big Hugs die cuts. So now I'm centering my fun background onto my grid mat to make sure I can center that sentiment. And then I also adhere the little dots above my eyes. I'm going to go through my critters and see which one I want to use, and I settled on those cute little mice giving each other a hug. I'm going to use some foam dimensionals to attach that as well. So once I have that placed onto my eye, I picked up the release paper and adhered the mice down. I absolutely love how this card is turning out, and I love this big bold sentiment with these cute little mice. And I'm going to go ahead and glue this now down to my card base. I have a top folding A2 size card, and I'm going to use my Misty to help me place that perfectly onto my card base, as they're both the same size. And there we have our first card. And I wanted to add a little bit more to it just to really bring out some more color. So I have these different pops of color. I'm going to add them in blue and in red, orange, yellow, and green. I think I do all of the main colors, red through purple, and I just love how to add these little bits of extra fun to the background. And there is our first card. So now I wanted to take the same concept and just kind of step it up a bit and make it interactive. So I have my Pear Blossom Press Easy Lights. They come with a pre-packed battery and LEDs circuit board, so everything is all in one kit. And I have 3 LEDs, so I am determining where I want to place those LEDs. The first one's going to be on the top left of my B, the other one's going to be on the top of my G, and my third one will be on the bottom of my I. So I just use a pencil where those holes need to go, and I was originally going to use my hole punch, and then I quickly realized that's not going to fit. They're too far into my card. So I'm just using a little piercer and my mat that is self-healing and poking those 3 holes where I made those pencil marks. So once I have all 3 of those and the hole goes all the way through, I can start putting my LEDs onto the back of this card background. Before I start adhering all of my interactive fun together, I want to make sure I remember that I need to stamp my push here sentiment from the Charge Me Up set, so that way I can give my card receiver a little note to know that something fun's going to happen when they push at a certain spot on the card. So I'm going to just use some purple tape. I normally just use some regular Scotch tape, but I'm all out in my craft room, so I grabbed my purple tape to help me place my LEDs. I'm placing them inside of the holes that I pierced and using this purple tape just to keep it inside of the hole. And I'm going to do that for all 3 of my LEDs. Next, I'm going to grab my bone folder and really make sure that that tape isn't going anywhere, and just really pressing down and making sure it's nice and secure around those LEDs. So now I'm going to test it. My LEDs are lighting up and it looks good. I thought I would try layering it with my sentiment just to see how it would light up behind the letters, and so far it's looking kind of cute. So now I can go ahead and get my sentiment all loaded up with that same thin foam adhesive. I've pulled off the release paper and applied it to center of the card, making sure that it covers my LEDs. And before I do anything else, I'm going to get out that Push Me sentiment, and I am going to stamp it in VersaFine Onyx Black ink. This is my favorite ink for stamping last minute things where I just want one nice clean stamp. So I laid my little mechanism to where the red dot where the card receiver needs to push over my background, so I knew exactly where to stamp. And now I'm going to use some purple tape, and I'm lining up that push button behind the sentiment, and then I'm going to use that to hold that little mechanism in place, as well as make sure any of my excess wires are tucked in on the back of my card. So now I have this extra thick foam from Heffy Doodle. It's the best for interactive elements, especially these Pear Blossom Press Lights, because it is the perfect thickness to make sure your mechanism is secure and enough space that it's not pressing up against the button, and it's just a really great thickness of foam adhesive. So I have my roll as well as these strips, and I'm just going to use the roll and strips together to create my foam to place against my card base. There you can see all my foams in place. I made sure my mechanism was nice and secure around with some foam tape around it. And now I'm going to place it onto my card base. And I originally was going to do the same thing as I did for my last card, but that foam tape's pretty thick and it exceeds the thickness of my MISTI to make sure it's really on that card base. So I just kind of winged it on my mat here and it worked out well. And you can see everything's working. My lights are lighting up and everything looks good. So I'm going to add those little dots above my eyes, and then I'm going to pick out which hugging critters I want for this card. I decide on those cute little birds. I thought sending big hugs with these tiny birds is just too funny. So I decide to glue this one onto my card. Because it's already a pretty thick card of that foam tape, I'm just going to go ahead and use my wet glue to glue those birds down to my card. So now I'm ready to add my finishing touches, very similar to how I did my last card. I'm bringing out my pops of colors, and I'm just going to use the exact same colors. I've got red through purple, and I give about 2 dots per color on their matching colored strips. So now I have my cards. Here they are. One of them is interactive and one is not, but they have the same color scheme and they're really fun and bright and vibrant. And I love that there's just so much attention to the color on this card. And again, a great way to use up all my scraps. I hope you enjoyed watching this tutorial on these cards and that you'll hop along with all of the rest of the Lawn Fawn fans for this quarters hop. You can find details of the hop, the next hopper, and everything else down below in my description, including all of the supplies that I use to make these cards. Have a wonderful day.